Hello, everyone. Welcome to Hacking HR for another really wonderful discussion. Today, we're going to be talking everything mental health and well-being and how can we build cultures that are going to support that in the long term. I really want to encourage you to use the chat today to let us know where you are joining us from, to ask questions and have discussions in there. We always get such great discussions going on in the chat, and we really love to see the insight and information that people bring into that area. So now if I could have Jessa bring the rest of the panelists on the stage, and we're going to start this discussion off. Thank you, everyone. I see all your lovely faces here today. Thank you for joining. And I can see we've got people coming in from Nepal and Greece and Zambia and Germany and Rwanda and the UK. So that is really super awesome. So thank you all for joining me. As we said at the beginning, we're going to be talking about mental health and well-being, the essential factors to create a sustainable culture that delivers for the people and the business. Just to start things off, a little introduction myself. My name is Renee Eaton. I run a workplace culture and leadership organization called Workplace Joy. But if we could just have everybody give a little introduction of themselves going around, we'll do this clockwise to start, and then we will do free mics the rest of the time so people can just jump in. So Stephanie, do you mind starting us off, introducing yourself? And if you could answer for me why you were drawn to this discussion. What was it about this discussion that made you want to come in and join and add some insight to us?
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Renee. My name's Stephanie Lemick. I'm a career HR professional. I've done every role from intern to executive and recently transitioned to my own business. So I'm now an HR consultant and also founder of an organization called The Wounded Workforce, which is all about creating trauma-informed workplaces. And I am thrilled to be part of this conversation because mental health is such an important aspect of who we are as people, and being able to create spaces where mental health is acknowledged and talked about and really is part of the culture of an organization is what I'm about. So I'm thrilled to be able to join these other panelists and have a great conversation, and appreciate everyone for joining.
Awesome. Thanks, Stephanie. Shauna, do you want to take it away now?
Sure, Renee, thank you so much, and lovely to be here with everyone. My name is Shauna Moran, and I'm also a business owner. I specialize in supporting organizations in scaling their well-being strategies as they scale their people and their profits and their growth. And I've been doing this work for over 7 years. I have a book in the area, so I'm always researching this particular topic. And I suppose, the main reason why I was drawn to this was because not only is there so much knowledge in this room here today, but I think the key to creating better workplaces that are healthier, that are happier, that are sustainable is empowering people with the right knowledge. And in my work, I'm all about understanding the root causes as to why burnout is happening in our workplaces. Because when we can understand that, we can create long-term strategies that are actually going to work. So I'm really excited for the conversation today.
Thanks, Shauna. Jamie, do you want to go next?
Hello, good morning, good afternoon, everybody. Thanks for having me. Very excited to be here. Definitely passionate about this topic, mental health and well-being. I've got about 18 or 16 years of HR experience, from startups to large corporations. And no matter how big the organization or how tenured the executive team, this is an important topic to focus on. My reason for being here is that coming out of the pandemic, we are all a little bit different than before the pandemic. And now more than ever, we have the ability and the responsibility to have this conversation and continue having these conversations, because this is what's expected of us from our employees as people leaders. And our businesses want to engage employees right now, and maybe in some organizations for the first time in the history of that organization. And so we've got an opportunity in front of us to help break down some of the stigmas around mental health and put a focus on how we can be helpful, beneficial, and make change that can last and sustain organizations. So I'm excited to be here.
Thanks, Jamie. Sheila, do you want to kick us off?
Yep. Hello, welcome everybody. So happy to be here. My name is Sheila Kruger, recently the head of global benefits at Zoom. And like Stephanie, I have now stepped into the role of advising, although I advise for startups to help them get into the market, which is really super fun. Why am I drawn to this topic? Oh my gosh, I have 2 adopted children, and so mental health and all the issues that come with that have been part of our family for a really long time. And I've been in HR for 25 years. And so I've always tried to make this a focus wherever I've worked, as well as overall wellness. I think it's all intertwined. And it's just so important that we take care of our employees and their families and make sure that everybody is where they need to be on the mental health spectrum, and us providing the assistance that they need to sustain themselves there.
Thanks, Sheila. And Cindy, last but not least, and this is hopefully maybe the only time you'll have to go last for the rest of the day.
Hello, everyone. My name is Sandy. I've been doing HR for 22 plus years. And the reason why I decided to work this particular to join this particular topic was because I don't think we're doing enough about this topic. I don't think we're speaking enough about it. And so that is why I decided to join. And thank you for having me.
Great. Thanks, Cindy. Awesome reasons all around as to why we're so involved in this type of a discussion. Mental health and well-being is something that you hear a lot about in workplaces. I think after going through the pandemic, it's on everybody's mind. We've seen that shift, and we've already been mentioning burnout here, and the idea that this is something that's becoming very important to people. What I would like to start the discussion off with is going to the second part of what the title of it was the business side. Because I think that deep down, we all understand why it's important on the personal side of things to have good mental health, to ensure that our well-being is good. But what is the business case for companies to build cultures that support employee mental health and well-being? Because I think that may be where we get the disconnect between seeing things put into place that we know are important and actually seeing companies go forward and do these things. Anybody want to kick us off and start that?
I'll jump in. Not to be the serial person to go first, but I really think that, when I think about mental health, it's just the right thing to do. Thinking about mental health at work for our employees, number one, it's just the right thing to do. It helps, though, to have a strong business case. And, I am quickly pulling up these statistics to look at, recently Monster.com did a survey of people entering the workforce. So when we look at attracting talent to join our workforce, so important, especially as we are looking at the shifting demographics of the population with so many people retiring. Attracting and retaining talent is key. And this recent survey from Monster says 92% of recent grads entering the workforce say it's important that they feel comfortable discussing mental wellness at work. 59% would quit a job if a workplace became toxic. 58% say the most important aspect of a job is work-life balance. And 54% of these people surveyed would turn down a job at a company that doesn't offer work-life balance. So when we think about, there's so many aspects of talent in HR that feed directly into the business case, but I really zero in on the fact that this new generation, future generations entering the workforce, mental health, being able to talk about it, being able to feel supported is absolutely a non-negotiable as it relates to a benefit or a part of the employer value proposition.
Yeah, jumping off of that, Stephanie, I think you're absolutely right. From a talent acquisition point, it's becoming more of what's expected for organizations to have in their language and their conversations and their culture. Not just a nice to have, or not just something on the side or an afterthought or an ERG around, but actually embedded and ingrained in how they operate and the decisions that they make. Another way to think about the why. I've done some speaking events on the why behind wellness, and I tie it to the level of stress that people were under during the pandemic. And in business, there's a need for us to be able to provide an ROI on our opportunities of what we're presenting and some of the things we're talking about. So when speaking with executives, I think there's also an opportunity to talk about the financial impact of not focusing on wellness, not focusing on well-being as a whole. They want people that are coming in, and they want people that are productive, and they want people that are focused on goals that are producing business outcomes. And how do you expect employees to do that if they have these other things that are happening in their lives that we're not supporting them on and helping them through effective and efficiently? The other thing is those stressors and that level of stress that we were under as a society and as individuals during the pandemic is also creating a cascade effect that we're just now starting to feel the ramifications of when it comes to addiction, when it comes to mental health crisis, when it comes to claims for delayed health issues. And so we're just now starting to see the financial impact of that on a benefit side as well. And so there's a lot of different ways I think that you can come at this conversation. But when you think about building that foundation or building something that's sustainable, these are some of the reasons why it's important to focus in on and how to present some of this information to an executive team or a founder CEO that might, and CFOs too, that might help to resonate from a business standpoint and an ROI standpoint.
So I was looking at the comments, and Tim made a really good point. A few benefits of good employee mental health for an organization: increased productivity, lower absenteeism, higher employee engagement, improves team dynamics, enhance creativity and innovation, reduce turnover rates, better customer service, cost savings, and positive organizational reputation. And to go off what he's talking about, because like we've been talking about pandemic, right? The two merged, the work life and the home life merged together when this whole thing happened. And it shouldn't so much be work-life balance. It should be a partnership. And it should be more of, there's days that I'm not going to be able to give 100%, whether it's a marriage, as a mother, as a sister, as a brother, as whatever. We're not able to meet the 100%. So sometimes we need that other person to meet us and complete that percentage that we cannot complete. And I believe that if we partner up with our employees that same way as a company, we would be, like Tim said, a lot more productive, less absenteeism, and it would actually create a more positive culture.
I'm looking at those comments as well, and I'm sorry, Renee. And I'm seeing the one about from Melanie saying more employees talk about balance and mental health, the less they actually do to support it. And I think that's a really important point about, how do we bring this all together? And I do think that employers have responded so well in the last few years as we've had heightened awareness and actual need for mental health solutions. And now that the focus has moved from COVID to return to office, we really need to take that next step. And I think we need to make sure that the employers that we, and having recently been one of those employers, that we're not just patting ourselves on the back for providing a solution to an issue that can and often is driven by work and work culture. So stress and anxiety are leading factors in why people seek mental health care. And so as a company, we need to look at ourselves and make sure we're not causing an undue amount of those things. Are we properly staffed? Are our goals well defined? Do people know their expectations for their work? Are we training managers to be people leaders and mentors instead of just taskmasters? And do we really provide work-life balance? And those things that were mentioned, like the engagement survey, things like that, can really help us figure those things out.
Yeah, I love that, Sheila. Thank you for mentioning that. You know, in my mind as we were talking about this is, you know, as an organization, as a culture, are we creating stress or are we alleviating it? And it, to me, it comes down to, how do your employees feel at the end of the workday when they close their laptop? Do they feel like they can actually walk away from the work and spend time with their family and be the other things that they are as human beings? Or do they feel anxiety? How do they feel on a Sunday night when they're sitting on the couch? Do they get the Sunday scaries at the thought of going into another week? And looking at somebody that's excited about a week ahead versus somebody that's dreading a week ahead at work, what difference are they going to have in their work? How much more productive, creative, how much more passionate are they going to be? So for me, it's all around equipping organizations with understanding those key pieces of influence that they have over supporting people's stress levels and mental health, like Sheila mentioned. You know, do we have clarity on roles and responsibilities? Do we have support from a manager? You know, do we have that psychological safety? You know, these are all things I'm sure we're going to discuss, but yeah, are we causing it or are we supporting it?
Yeah, I really love what everybody said there. And Sheila, don't apologize to me. I'm just trying to make sure that I give a long enough pause so that if people want to jump in, they can jump in. So don't, if you see me on mute, just talk over me. And I love that. And I love what you said, Cindy, about the work-life balance. Because in my mind, it's not living to work or working to live. When we go into work, we're living. Like, we're living our lives in the workplace. So important, like you said, about those Sunday scaries. I remember reading one time that the most common time for people to have a heart attack was Sunday night or Monday morning, because of the stress that our body kicks in of going into work. The cortisol starts kicking up because we're worried and we're anxious. And even after you retire, that habit that your body has built stays with you. So even years afterwards, the most common time to have a heart attack, if your body has gotten into that rhythm, is still Sunday night, Monday morning. So obviously really good cases on both the individual and the business side as to why this is important. And I agree, Stephanie, it's just the right thing to do. We don't need workplaces that are trying to, you know, drain every last drop out of people, because that's not good for the people, but it's also not good for the business as well. So really clear indicators that this is something we need to focus on. So what makes it difficult for companies to build this type of culture? What might be the barriers that keep organizations and leaders from fully investing in the health and the well-being of their employees?
I'll jump in here. Human beings are hard. That's the bottom line of the why I think we struggle with it. Is there's no one size fits all. There's no one answer. There's no one thing. There's no, 5 steps to build a sustainable culture. There's so many nuances to that, depending on your team, your core values, and all of that. So I think that's one of the things that gets in the way, is that we're looking for a grandiose solution, when in reality, it just needs to be meeting people where they are and being open to those conversations and creating a space for those conversations to happen in a healthy and natural way. And then, as much as you can possibly afford as a business, to support those conversations, support those employees through. It doesn't have to be you're making Forbes headlines or it's not good enough. It can just be that you're making an impact on that individual person, and your culture allows for that individual person to thrive as a result of the support that you're able to provide. So I think just this idea of we don't know where to start. We don't know what to do, right? We don't know we don't even know what to approach. And then no matter what, we've tried all these things, and no matter what, somebody's not happy. Well, that's because you're trying to make it a one size fits all. Instead, just step back, empower your managers to have those conversations, empower your people leaders to have those conversations, your HR teams. And don't try to think that you've got to solve everything for everyone with one piece of technology. Be willing to be flexible and have the courage to allow for those conversations.
Yeah, a big thing, and Cindy, you mentioned this, is, you know, just generally the market, the way organizations are operating right now. You know, it's challenging for a lot of organizations. You know, they're under-resourced. There's a lot of pressure on to meet certain criteria or KPIs and bring money in, and that pressure has, for a lot of organizations, been there, you know, the last couple of years, and we haven't necessarily come down from that. So when I work with organizations that are really struggling with that, you know, it's really around looking at, how do we achieve success? You know, are we looking at the whole human in terms of achieving success, or are we just looking at you know, the doing, the actual input of ours? As opposed to, how do we actually get there in a sustainable way? Because, you know, how do we, and this comes down to the question, like, how do we scale our growth and our profitability without having an increase in stress? You know, and I think, as Jimmy mentioned, you know, there's no one size fits all, and we continually have to be asking ourselves those questions in order to truly build sustainability for the long term. You know, and it's not about these big budgets or big transformational pieces of technology. It's the basic pieces, and I break it down into the 3 pillars of reducing workplace burnout and building sustainable cultures. You know, it's equipping the individual to support themselves and to understand their own well-being and their stress. It's about equipping the leader, because the leader has such a high level of influence. So training managers, equipping them from an emotional intelligence perspective, understanding the key pieces they need to have within their team, from workload management to, you know, running great one-to-ones. And then on a cultural level, you know, what are we doing? For example, one big issue I see with stress is that, you know, companies continue to just take on projects. They're not taking any time for downtime, for retrospectives, right? It's one after the other. So we're continually on that stress cycle until we actually move into burnout. So can we create moments of downtime, of learning, of retrospectives? Even if we're in a startup, we can create a few days for that, right? All of these basic pieces can really support long term.
I'd add also, I think, you know, Shauna, Jamie, your points are spot on. I think also, like, let's be real. This is hard work. Integrating mental health and well-being as a core aspect of your culture, of your business, is hard work. It's a journey. And so often we look at organizations and what they're doing, and they're putting this all on the HR team. The HR team cannot own individually mental health and well-being. This is a cultural shift. This is a cultural change. This is not a check the box, you know, 1 month a year special project. And I think that's part of the challenge, is it is this cultural shift. It is this way to address something that's systemic. And like Jamie said, but for all these unique individuals, everyone who's different. So how do you do that? And that's why I'm such an advocate for trauma-informed workplaces, because it addresses the fact that we all have these unique experiences we're bringing with us to work, but it also equips leaders, HR professionals, individuals with processes, standards, procedures, and values to help support everyone at the same time.
I also think that, you know, part of the reason why it's such a issue sometimes. It's budget. Sometimes the company doesn't have the budget for it. Maybe perhaps because they are a startup and there's still so many unknowns. Um, and so um, I do strongly believe that what we can do is be able to be very transparent, help our managers, our leaders be transparent with our staff, because it's not just about the stress that they are feeling in the office, but also outside the office in their personal lives. So, how can we help them? And how can we understand and how can we better cater and find things that are going to help them if we don't have that transparency and we don't have that trust built? So, building a trust and understanding every facet of it's not just what we created in the workplace, but also what they're dealing with outside of work. And trying to find some, you know, maybe perhaps some areas of or some items that could potentially be free, if it's a startup or if it's a company that doesn't have quite those funds. There is, programs like the EAP program that are part of the um, medical insurance benefits, or even talking to your brokers and actually asking them, like, hey, is there anything you can do for my company to kick back some of the profits that you're getting, those commissions that you're getting from me? Can you kick some of that back to me so that I can be able to do something for my company? And I don't think that a lot of companies, especially newer companies, understand how much more they can leverage off their insurance brokers as well.
Oh, you're muted there, Sheila. Don't lose those golden nuggets of insight.
Sorry, I thought I clicked the button. I think that's a really great point, Cindy, that there's, different levels of how you can participate. And as a startup, trying to get the best mental health integrated into your healthcare benefits is really great. And then scaling up from there. But I think, the other thing is we talk a lot about ROI, and ROI is a term that makes me a little bit mental myself. Probably could use a little therapy around that. But to me, there's two different kinds of ROI. There's financial ROI, which is that return on investment that every finance person wants us to provide. But the other one is, I think I call it the HR ROI, which is the return on the individual. And I think it's so important for us to be able to talk about how that will make a difference in productivity and all the things that were mentioned earlier by Cindy and the participant. It's just that we don't always have the time or the ability to look at the data analytics to really go out and prove that financial ROI for people. So again, leaning on your broker and your vendors to help you provide data that shows, I just know that I had a myriad of data when I was at Zoom, and it was like I could see, as mental health claims went up, so did other areas of physical trauma and physical maladies come up too. So my favorite hashtag of all time is mental health is health, because we've got to remember it's all connected. It's like you don't just take your brain out and your body does its own thing without how those influences. So we have to really think about the whole person and the holistic health of the person. So I think having your broker or your vendors help you to look at that data so that you can get that financial ROI. And then I think as HR professionals, we have to get really good at storytelling and talking about the impact that these programs can have on our employees individually and as a group even. So doing those kinds of things, I think, can help us maybe get over that financial ROI hump when it comes to the finance people.
Such great input there from everybody. And you all touched on things that it's like, okay, I've got like 6 other questions now just based upon what people were talking about there. We could probably talk about this for several hours or several days for that matter. We did touch on the idea of how people's lives outside of work, how we can help them with their mental health and well-being that way. But a big one for me is how the work itself impacts people's mental health and well-being. And I think that's why it's so important to build that culture that is cognizant of how it's having that impact on people. And I know, Shauna, we touched on burnout a little bit earlier, and how, burnout is that idea of being overextended, negative and cynical, and also not feeling effective in our work as we go about it. And earlier, people were talking about role clarifications and the relationship with their managers. What are some aspects of the employee experience that people go through, or aspects of the workplace itself that impact their mental health and well-being, that companies and leaders should be aware of within their culture?
Yeah, I love that we're asking this question because it is really, really important. Burnout, what research has actually shown us is that burnout in the workplace is at an all-time high in 2023 compared to previous years. So we're seeing more people burnt out. Slack found earlier on this year that 43% of their mid-level managers are also burnt out. So we have a big problem on our hands, and what we've done over the last 3 years is not good enough. That's what the data is showing us. So when I work with an organization, I will look at those 3 pillars to reducing workplace burnout that I mentioned above, because it's not an individual issue, it's a systemic issue. So we need to stop putting all of the focus and the responsibility on the individual. That's the first thing we need to look at. And then, we want to equip the individual, we want to empower them, we want to support them in building deeper levels of self-awareness so they can understand their own maybe trauma and how that's coming into work, right? So for example, how are they equipped to understand their own stress cycle? Are they struggling to set healthy boundaries in the workplace around their work-life hours or integration? But the other 2 pillars, the leader and then the organization. And let's look at the organization first. How are we setting up our team on a process, on an operational level, and on a cultural level? So for example, a big problem I see is back-to-back meetings all day, every day. What is our culture around meetings, and how is that contributing to stress? I often see leaders, individual team members on these meetings all day, every day, with little to no time for a break, little to no time for a lunch break. And then what they have to do is they have to work extra hours at the end of the workday to catch up on all the emails and the notifications in their inbox. And this is just keeping us within that stress cycle, in that fight or flight. We don't have that time for deep work, our ability to work in a creative way, to think through certain things. We don't have flexibility to maybe go for a walk and think about a problem that's come up, right? And come back to it with a different perspective. So how can we bring in more asynchronous communication within our team so that we can create more space and time for people, so that they have more time to do the work, to think about the work, to be creative? The other thing is that second pillar, that leadership level, is really, really important. As I mentioned, a lot of leaders themselves are burnt out, right? So how can we expect stressed out leaders to support stressed out team members, right? So how are we equipping those leaders with the support that they need? Because yes, they have to take ownership over mental health. Everybody does within our organizations, but how are we equipping them to feel at their best? Right? So how many direct reports do they have, right? Very basic, but important. What is their own workload outside of managing direct reports? How are they set up with things like clarity on their roles and responsibilities? How are they set up with managing their workload in an asynchronous way? Are they getting the support, the quality support that they need from their own leader? Because when they have all of those pieces in place, they can provide that to their team members. So these are the basic pieces that research shows us that actually really support people. I mean, think of role and responsibilities. It sounds very basic. Do I have clarity on what's expected of me and what success looks like in my position? It sounds very basic. But if we take that as a remote worker, if I don't know what success looks like to me, if I don't know what's expected of me, I'm going to have an undercurrent of anxiety, trying to do everything, hoping that I'll meet expectations. right? Whereas if I have everything mapped out super clearly, I know what my plan is, my manager knows, there's transparency, there's clarity, and I feel equipped to do that, my best work, I'm going to feel at my best, or I'm going to feel better at least. So, you know, the 3 pillars we need to look at in a systemic way, and equipping leaders to feel good themselves so that they can show up the best for their team, and then implement some of these basic foundational pieces that are very, very often missing.
You know, I like to think about this. Think about how jobs can actually improve our mental health. Think about how good you feel when you're in a job where you feel empowered, where you feel like you are contributing, you're doing something that adds value. And I kind of always think about one of my favorite principles of a trauma-informed workplace is an empowerment. And empowerment comes down to 4 things. Choice. You have an opportunity to make choices in your job, what work you're doing, how you're doing the work. Kind of the opposite of micromanagement. The next, your strengths are being leveraged. And as a Gallup certified strengths coach, this is probably my favorite. When you are able to use your strengths and the unique kind of beauty of who you are to work every day, that's incredibly fulfilling. And more than on just a professional level, but on a profound personal level as well. The next is you're recognized for the work you're doing, that contribution to your team, and how you're helping others move forward in their work, how you're helping others contribute to the organization and the goal. There's a reason you joined this organization. How are you connecting back into that mission or those goals? And the last is growth. And I think all of us are interested in continuing to grow as people, whether it's professionally, whether it's in other aspects. And when there is an opportunity for growth as part of your role as well, whether it's, you know, promotion or maybe it's just an expansion of skill set, those things really can enhance mental health. And all of those things are things that are part of a really great job. So really great jobs can be incredibly empowering and can be a huge boost to someone's mental health. It's being thoughtful about how we shape those roles, those jobs, how Shauna mentioned creating that clarity around what success looks like. When we look at how we create jobs and really communicate them in a clear and powerful way, we can enhance mental health through that.
Just a couple other things to add to what Stephanie and Shauna have already mentioned. When it comes to the employee experience, I think one thing to take into consideration is what's the chatter that's going on underneath some of the situations. If they see a coworker that's going through something, they're looking to how the business responds, right? And so setting the tone, setting the precedent, going above and beyond wherever possible, those things are going to resonate, and so is lack thereof, right? And so again, that other aspect of it, also making the question of part of when you're going through goal setting, what aren't we doing, right? These are goals that we're setting. These are the goals, the direction that we're going, but what also aren't we doing? What aren't we focused on, or what are we deprioritizing so that capacity is respected, and burnout, you can help to prevent it in that way. But it also, more importantly, sets the tone of culture of it's okay that we're not focused on everything all at once, all at the same time. And then the digital aspect of the employee experience, I think, plays a large part in mental health and well-being, and the ability to thrive and enjoy what you're doing. So are you working in an organization where you're on the cutting edge of technology? And is that part of your culture? And is it reflected in your day-to-day tasks and responsibilities for what your employees are signing up to do? And if not, what changes need to be made there so that you can align, what your expectations are from a digital experience in that employee experience with what the business is trying to accomplish. There's alignment issues that can make a huge difference in the employee and the employer experience. And we all want that to be the most mutually beneficial as possible, and that's what allows for businesses and employees to thrive as a team and as individuals.
Yeah, I really love that. Great input on that. And a lot of times when I'm working with organizations, and we touch so much on it when we're talking about wanting people to feel appreciated and to be involved and to feel confident using their strengths. And I think we miss this side of, we focus on culture a lot of times as seeing it as the cognitive side of culture. And it's the mission and the vision and the values and how we want people to show up. But we miss the emotional culture of organizations, how people feel while they're at work. And I think that's where we start seeing the roots of your burnout and people leaving and turnover because they don't feel appreciated, or they don't feel confident in what they're doing, or they're cynical and negative about the organizations they're in. So we're missing that emotional side of it that leads to good mental health and well-being. And I see a lot of coming in the comments here talking about that role of leadership. And I think specifically the people managers that have teams of people below them that they're leading within the organizations. And I know we touched on the idea of like one-on-ones and, the impact that even that can have on leaders within the organizations. But it's hard being a leader. We all know this because people are all different and they all have different ways to communicate and they all have different needs and they all have different things they value. And a lot of times leaders end up being leaders without having any of that experience and then not necessarily being provided with the skills training to get there. So in order to really build this type of a sustainable culture around mental health and well-being, what are some ways that organizations can equip their people leaders to support this?
One big thing that comes to mind is ongoing training and development does speak to so many people, leaders who have got into the position of leadership because they were good as an individual contributor. And they don't or haven't necessarily had the support that they need to know how to lead people, And one big thing that comes to mind is how can we equip leaders to coach other people? Because when we're coaching other people, we're empowering them to come up with their own ideas, their own solutions, and we're creating the safe space for them to get there. And oftentimes this is hugely beneficial, of course, for the individual, but also for the leader, because I see leaders, especially very compassionate leaders, empathetic leaders, they take on a lot of the burden of their team's issues or their team's challenges or problems. So if we can equip those leaders to coach, they're not trying to swoop in and fix all of the problems, but rather empower the individual. And coaching changes the culture long term because it equips people to start to think for themselves and be more resourceful and take ownership and more accountability. So that's just one skill that I feel is incredibly important, as well as equipping leaders with those 4 to 5 key pieces of how do I set up my projects and my workload management within my team? How do I effectively delegate and ensure that my team members and the timelines I set are realistic for them, but also ambitious, right? So how do I coach around those pieces? How do I coach around a lack of engagement or something that I see as lack of engagement, right? Because we know that as we progress through the burnout stages, there's 5 stages, people can start to be more cynical, which you mentioned, Renee. So how do I, as a leader, give feedback in the moment, address that and coach that instead of making assumptions around, it's underperformance or whatever story I create? So how can I be equipped to have those conversations so that it doesn't become a problem, a long-term problem? So those are some of the key pieces that I think leaders need to be equipped with time and time again. It's not a once-off, tick the box.
I think for me, a huge thing leaders can do is be vulnerable and being willing to share your own challenges. And this looks different for everyone. Don't do something you're not comfortable with by any means. But something for me that I think was powerful as a leader is I'm sure we all can remember, 2020, 2021, just the news cycle, just constantly being inundated with incredibly bad news. At one point, I turned my notifications off on my Apple Watch because I just could not deal with that constant din of really bad information. And so, what I started to do was when I was having a hard time, when there was a piece of news that really, struck me, or, something happened that it was hard for me to move forward, I would share that with my team. And I would say, hey, I just want to let you know I saw this news. I'm pretty upset. You know, if you're having a reaction to it, that's okay. If you need to take some space, please do so and let me know any support you need. And I think, I don't have to go into a ton of detail about why I'm feeling a certain way, but just showing that I'm a human, I'm a person, and I recognize your humanity too. You give that permission to, yourself and your team members to say, like, hey, I need this space right now for my own mental health. Like, can I have it? And then you got to be willing to follow through and provide that space for your team.
Excellent. Thanks for that input there, because I know it's such a huge, huge area when it comes to leadership and making sure that people have what they need to support the people below them. And that comes through both, as we were saying earlier, through the systemic changes and through the individual ones that can be applied to people as they come through. We're 14 minutes out from the end of this discussion. What I really like to focus on is maybe providing people with some examples of where you've seen really good mental health practices or well-being initiatives, and kind of looking past the idea of well-being programs, because I think we all know that it's not a specific program or, per se, a resilience training session that really builds the sustainable part within organizations. If that was the case, I think we could have mental health and well-being solved by next week. But alas, that doesn't seem to be the case. Have you seen, or are you doing so yourself within your organization, specific practices, whether they be systemic things that have been put in place in the organization through policies, procedures, or individual ones you're seeing on the people leader side, where this is something that a leader has been doing with their team that works really well to help promote good mental health and well-being? I know there's not things that we can necessarily always copy and paste, but people can see examples of perhaps where they could try to make positive changes within their own organizations. That's a big question.
I'm going to jump in because I think of one thing that we did at Zoom during the pandemic, and that was, we really did. I know everybody else called it Zoom fatigue. We called it meeting fatigue. Everybody was in all those meetings, and it just really felt like your whole day was spent, looking at your teammates or, external people. And so we had one of our leaders that started really evangelizing the 3 A's for meetings. And I loved it, and I still use it now in my private business. And it is have an agenda. So let the people you're inviting know what the purpose of the meeting is, because that leads to the second A, which is attendees. So if I get a meeting notice and I see the agenda and I know that I have no power or no input or nothing to contribute to that, I should have the ability and to just turn around and say, I'm not the person for this meeting. You need to have Bob come from finance, or you need to have so-and-so come from another department, or maybe it's somebody above me or below me that's going to have a better take or be able to take better action on it. And then the third one is action and accountability. Take notes during the meeting, know what the action items are, because otherwise you have that same meeting over and over and over again, because nobody wrote it down and because nobody's following up on anything. And so a month later, The person that called the first meeting's like, oh, I haven't heard anything about that. Let's bring everybody together again, and then you're going to rehash it all. And you can just cut down on so many meetings by doing those kinds of things and just empowering yourself to say, no, that's not a meeting I need to take. Just do it. Just really do it.
I love that, Sheila. And I have to jump off a little bit earlier, but one thing I did want to share that's worked incredibly well for a lot of my clients and a lot of the teams I work with is to have a conscious conversation around well-being practices. And one way, and leaders can do this on their team, right? Because it is going to look different for every team. So I love when leaders actually bring this to conversation within their team and say, when it comes to well-being, what do we want to start doing as a team to support us as individuals, as a team? What do we want to stop doing? What's not working? For example, us being on Slack at all hours of the night isn't working. So how do we change this? And then what do we want to continue to do? What are we doing that's actually working? And have the team come up with the best practices together. And why that works really well is because everybody's involved in the solution, right? So everybody feels part of it and they're willing and eager to implement these best practices. Plus, you're going to get better ideas, right? Then rather as a leader, here are things we can do to support well-being, read this and let's implement it, right? So to create that shared responsibility of well-being and also create that space where people can speak up. I think that's one very, very easy way that leaders can work with their teams on well-being.
Thanks, Shauna, and thank you for joining us today. I know you have to leave a little earlier, but thank you very much for being part.
Thank you for having me.
Any other takers on that, whether they be at the system level within organizations as to what changes we could make in order to support mental health and well-being, or even small practices and policies that we can put in place?
You know, something that's pretty cool that I've seen, and it's new, you know, some of us have seen the advent of fractional roles within organizations. You know, I have a good friend who's a fractional chief wellbeing officer. And what a novel idea. Her name's Colleen Seringer, in case you're interested in her information. But what a great idea to really dedicate a strategic C-level partner, maybe for only a fraction of that full-time position, but have someone dedicated to the strategy, to integrating, to truly partnering across the business to integrate well-being. And I think those types of innovations are just going to be an incredible way to approach well-being as a key aspect, a key partnership for every function in an organization. And again, not just kind of an HR accountability or an HR project.
And I would say something two things that are to me would be, you know, fairly easy to just set up. Allow for 1 hour to be blocked off in your schedule, even if it's just once a week. That's an hour to either do growth, you know, take a webinar, seminar of your choosing, or even simply just to kind of just to breathe, right? Just block out an hour just for you. And you know, and allow that for the rest of your staff. I think that's one very simple, easy one. And one other one that I think would actually be beneficial would be a mental health day. Allowing the staff to take a mental health day. Guess what? You are already accounted for it in the budget. You're not, you know, going out of pocket or trying to make any changes other than allowing that mental health day, because it's already part of the days that you're going to be paying your staff. So why not just give it to them and, you know, give them that time frame to just kind of be able to take time to reflect, to take time to be able to just, you know, do something that isn't, you know, used for a vacation, or they're not sick, but they just need to kind of decompress.
I love that.
Yeah,
Sandy. Oh, go ahead, Sheila. Go.
just real quick.
Oh,
Oh, sorry. On that idea of a mental health day, we do offer once a month mental health days at Trust Radius, and it has been a game changer. The connections that we see with nature, with family, spa days and pedicures, trips to the library, seeing something in the city that they've never seen before. We encourage them to disconnect completely. If you're caught online, which I've been guilty of, we're very quick to step up and say, hey, that's not what today is about. You're supposed to be disconnecting and focusing on wellness in whatever manner that means the most to you, is how we promote that. And it is definitely a game changer.
Yeah, I was just going to mention a couple of other quick tips that are really useful to me. And that is, if you have a 30-minute meeting, schedule it for 25. Keep your boundaries, stop, take that 5-minute break between that and your next meeting. If all you do is stand up and walk to the bathroom and back, you are miles ahead of just sitting at your desk all day long, meeting after meeting after meeting. So if it's an hour meeting, set it for 50. Take that break in between. It's super important that you do that. And I know I had a bunch of friends and peers during the pandemic that were working crazy hours. And so we all added to our email, tagline about, hey, just because I'm sending you this now doesn't mean you have to hop out of bed and answer it. You respond in your work hours and we will work asynchronously. This is what was convenient for me. And you can use your own wording for that. But I think those kinds of things, just to let people know, and just kind of a constant trickle of, talking about boundaries and making sure that they know you don't expect them to work in the middle of the night and do those types of things.
Yeah, I really love that, Sheila. I think by now we've probably all seen the image of the brain scans of people in back-to-back meetings. All those little red light up zones in our heads, and how important that sometimes just building a culture that encourages these types of behaviors, that not just allows for them, like gives permission for them, but actively encourages people to plan their meetings that way, to schedule breaks into their day. And sometimes those words that we've almost seen them as morally bad, like things like laziness and being slow and resting, where it's like, it's be busy and it's be productive and it's always being on the go. I think that we need to pull back from those a little bit more and really focus on what it means to be a human being and what it means to taking care of human beings within our workplaces, and that those human beings will then take care of our workplaces and the business that needs to be done. We've got 3 minutes left. It's been a great discussion. I always like to, I'm those people, I always like to head back to emotions when it comes to workplaces, because I think they're just the underrated champions or villains as to what happens within our workplaces. So I'm just going to throw this one out here in our last 2 minutes now that we have, is if you could pick 3 ways that you would like people to feel in a workplace that promotes good mental health and good well-being, what would be the 3 feelings you would want people to regularly express and feel within those workplaces? And feel free in the comments to shout out as to what you would like to be feeling within your workplace.
I'll jump in here. I would say safe, empowered, and valued.
Those are my exact 3 that I just wrote down. So we are definitely aligned.
Great minds.
I was thinking fulfilled, supported, and happy.
I had a combination of the 2, so and I see appreciation on the comments.
Yeah. And I just love that, because within the 4 people here, we all see it from the same light. We know how we want people to feel. We know how we want them to be able to show up each day. And then it's going from that point. We see fun, valued, and safe coming in here, safe, valued, and happy, empowered, recognized, and trusted. So all very similar ones. So we know what we need to feel in order to be productive, happy people. Now it's our workplaces is going out of that and saying, hey, what do we need to supply to people? What type of environment do we need to build? What do people need to feel supported in those ways in order to build that sustainable culture around mental health and well-being? We are 12:59. Any last words that anybody wanted to get in there before we finish off here, or just had that burning need to express? I see great feelings coming through here in the chat.
One last thing, don't forget to incorporate laughter into your day.
Yeah, love that, Jamie. That what a great way to end. We're right at 1 o'clock. Thank you everybody for joining us. Thank you, Stephanie, Jamie, Sheila, Cindy, and Shauna that we had here earlier. I hope that people are going to take away some great pieces from this to be able to apply to their own workplaces, so we can build those safe and those happy and those trusted and those valued workplaces that are going to make people really fulfilled and happy and performing at their best. So thank you again, everybody. Have a great rest of your morning, afternoon, evening, night, wherever you are in the world. Thank you for joining us today.
Thank you. Bye, guys.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye.